Hey friends, Shane from howtowrench.com, and we are here with Lethal Leathers. How you doing?
What's up, man?
He's a fan of the channel and happens to be in the Phoenix area. We met, 2 years ago, I think now.
I'd say so.
And you reminded me how much I haven't gotten done because you hung out like a year ago, and my bagger kind of took way backseat priority compared to all the track bikes that I ended up working on. But you got a KX250, and we did a video last night, or I did, preparing for doing a two-stroke motor, and we're starting to do some of the teardown. And I'm having a blast with you as usual already, but you're a aircraft mechanic.
Yes.
And you were telling me, we aren't going to share the one, you were telling me they were doing a little slang, but probably not appropriate. But we were just talking about the similarities between turning wrenches and, you know, what we know and what we don't know. So we're showing EJ here the tricks of the trade here on a two-stroke engine. And we're at the point where we were just getting ready. Well, actually, we just pulled the flywheel or the rotor, if you will. And you were starting to ask me some other questions. What were you asking about those lines?
These timing marks, these tick marks here have to line up with that little tang on the case.
Yep, so that's your stationary mark on the case, or if you actually look, there's even a little arrow. If you look really close right there, or it lines up with the mark on the back side there. And so the service manual is going to tell us to set it at a certain position. So typically on two-stroke dirt bikes, it's really common to be in the middle, and that would make sense, right? Sure. But what the race teams are doing is they're dialing that into a specific degree with a timing light, and they know what works, and they do this piston or this compression ratio or this port job or whatever. And so from the factory, it already has a couple of marks that they could use as reference marks. But what serious engine builders are doing, once they dyno it and dial in their package to what they want, then they're going to go in here and make their own mark. And what that's just actually what it's represented would be easier to show. Why don't you grab the camera, and it's easier to picture it on a degree wheel. Okay, so we're going to fire. We're always firing before top dead center. So you'll see in the service manual where something might fire at like 10, these are superficial numbers, but 10 degrees at idle. And then it will advance and do 30, 40, even 50 degrees at wide open throttle. We need to have the spark happen sooner, the faster the engine's turning, because we're speeding through there faster. And to let the whole entire burn happen, the faster we go, we need to have it happen sooner, because we want to light it here. We want to start the burn. The piston is still going up. So this is before top dead center. So as that piston is still going up, this burn is starting to expand that fuel. And what we want is when the piston crests top dead center and starts to go on the downstroke, we want over here that maximum pressure of that explosion, so that's pushing the piston down. So these numbers are really important for at idle and wide open throttle. But back to your motor. And this goes for anything. It could be the GSXR, it could be the DL, it could be Harley, it could be anything. Is that what these are really representing is what you set it for at idle. You can't check that wide open throttle except on a dyno, where you'd be able to have a timing light and then really be able to figure it out. So this is, like I said, that idle specification. And if we move it to one or the other marks, what we're basically doing is we're going to tell this pickup magnet and the pickup on the rotor itself, we're going to be having that fire either sooner or later. So you might see terms like advanced or retarded, or the two different terms you hear people talking about, like, oh man, hey, get an ignition advancer, okay? Or they'll take and they'll mount this plate where it's advanced, meaning if I advance it, that means I'm going to make this number go this direction, okay? So if I give it more timing, now usually most people don't care at idle. So when you advance an ignition system or retard it, whatever way you go, you're going to gain somewhere and lose somewhere. That's just the reality of it. Well, most people don't care how their dirt bike runs at idle and slow speed, right? They want it wide open. So what they might find is when they advance this, that it idles rougher or just isn't as smooth. Now, through the electronics, it's trying to, navigate some of this on its own as well. But On your old motorcycles, this was actually mechanical, where it used springs and weights. And then that was even much more tunable by the do-it-yourselfer, because you could change the springs really easy, and you could actually make it still run that timing at slow speed. And then by changing the spring tension, you could make it change its wide open throttle much easier. So anyway, those are just some of the terms we were talking about, and to kind of be able to see a window of what this really looks like. Good stuff.
Interesting.
All right, since we have this off our hand right now, I've got plenty of videos on this, so we're not going to go to a full-fledged video on pulling these rotors or whatnot. But I was telling you a story, and you were like, it was just making sense to you. And so I thought, well, maybe I've never told that well enough in the past of why you want to make sure and use the right kind of puller. Use something like this, or if you want to follow me, I normally don't have a cameraman here, so let me grab. What you don't want to use are, obviously this one's too big, but what you don't want to use is one of these where they grab onto it like this and then pull it off. Obviously the right size one. And I learned this the hard way, and that's why EJ, while you're laughing, is that, where did I set the rotor now? Oh, I put it on. So when I took my very first one off, I think I was 16, 17 years old. I hope my buddy Greg Shikin at Champion Cycles sees this too, because he's a Pikes Peak champion and just a legend from back home. But it was really funny that I was a kid working in a garage, and I used the puller. Someone showed me an automotive puller, and I pulled on that, and I got it off, and it was really stuck. I mean, it was really, 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 really stuck. So I built the motor, put it back together, was all excited, and I lost spark and couldn't figure out what happened. So I take it to the dealer, and in 2 seconds, Greg looks at it, and he's like, yeah, what'd you use for a puller? And I tell him, and you know, obviously I didn't have the correct one, something like this, or even this whole puller kit. Can you show this over here? These are the same thing. You'd have the right thread and pitch or whatnot, and then it would thread in like this. It's the same thing as this. This is just an all-in-one, and I just grab it because it's such a go-to on Japanese motorcycles. But the problem is that when you pull from the outside and you're pushing on here, what happened to me, and apparently is fairly common, is that when they're really stuck on there, it will take and actually hold here, and you're pulling on here, and what that'll do is it's going to bend it. It's basically going to fold it. It's going to push this in, which is going to pull this out. And in the case when you do that, what it does is now it moves the position of this pickup point in relationship to the pickup sensor that's going to tell it when to fire, when to spark. And these are all extremely accurate because you're keyed. So we're going to be keyed to the crankshaft. So that timing mark and where that coil is mounted is all exactly a degree on that wheel. Okay. So if you bend that, what happens is you move that magnet over here, which then it misses the coil, and then you lose spark. But I don't know how many times this has happened to people and got them in a tight spot where they were like, what the hell, man? It had spark. What'd I do? And then you're starting to kind of chase things like, well, did I pinch the wire? I think in my case, I even replaced the coil. Like, I did everything possibly wrong to where when I finally then went to the dealer, found out that it was my human error for how I removed it. And I can't tell you the number of these that I've changed over the years from people then bringing me their motors once I went into the industry later on. And same thing like with Greg, you'd go, what'd you use for a puller? So back when I was getting into this field and growing up, like this puller was, hundreds of dollars, it could be a couple $100. And so it was really hard when you're working out of your garage to think, well, is it worth it? If I'm going to use a puller one time. And that's what gets us to cheating. And the whole, gonna search YouTube and find out a redneck trick or whatnot. But today, there's just really not a need. Like this entire kit right here, which has all these different pullers, I think this whole kit is like $40, right? So, I mean, I can buy I could buy one of these for like $15 now. The only downside is they're not really hardened, and they're pretty much what I want to call junk. This isn't. This is by K&L. This is a hardened puller. I could use this thing a million times over. But this kit has its place. I mean, it is what it is. You know, the fact that if I might use it 1 or 2 times, and if I have to buy another one at 15 bucks, I don't mind, because it fits in here, and then I can throw it back in the case. So I would say if you have the, you know, 40 bucks, buy the kit, 40, 50 bucks, I think it is, buy the kit, and then you have a nice holder for it as well. So can't do it right this second because we're live, but I can go back on later and put some links to that. If you look at last night's video where I talked about all the tools you need for a 2-stroke, you could see there's an Amazon tool link, and I've got 2-stroke tools specifically laid out in there, 4-stroke, shop tools, different things. But that's what we got going on. Is anybody live or commenting? Can you see? 9
people.
Okay.
I don't know about comments.
Yeah, I don't know how to run it either. You know, I'm going to try and do a lot more live stuff this year, especially when we have people like you fans coming in and hanging out in the shop and having fun. But I'll keep doing some videos today if you want. If somebody could comment and say, yeah, keep making them, because these do get saved. And then I'll go ahead and maybe do something, because your big thing was you wanted to learn about the power valve system.
Yeah.
You don't have that in aircraft, I take it. But you got a whole bunch of stuff I know nothing about. Like, I couldn't even imagine diving into your world, right? Maybe the power valve would be worth doing. You know, one of the other things is the reason we're taking this off. If anybody's a die-hard factory mechanic right now, you might be looking at this and going, man, that fool's taking it off in the wrong order. We were talking about this earlier. The service manual would have us taking the cylinder off first. I highlighted this in the video a little bit last night. And then they would have us taking off the left and right side covers. So they'd have you down to the bare case, and then you'd be using these tools that would support the piston on this block, that would hold it, and then you'd be able to take these on and off and torque them properly on installation as well. And I don't like to do that, for the point being, like, this is my homemade one, and you can see where the piston is dug in there a lot. I think it's a lot of stress on the piston. It's a lot of stress on the top rod bearing for really no reason. So on the removal, we use an impact because we can just yank it off pretty quick. On the other side, when I go to do the primary drive gear, we've got gear jammer tools that we can jam between a couple of teeth. You'll see this here in a second. And I'll do another live video when we get to this point. But anyway, I could jam it that way, and then I can hold it so that I can get that nut off. But I'm not having to really mess with the piston. So I do take my motors apart a little bit differently than the manuals. I leave the jug on there. And the other thing is, like, we're not changing this piston today. We're doing crank bearings. This piston doesn't have very many hours on it, you said. So we're doing tranny bearings, crank bearings, seals, sealing up the integrity of the 2-stroke case. We're in that area, and we don't need to do a piston. So last thing in the world I want to do is accidentally hurt that piston. When I have the jug off, I lose all my protection. That thing flops around. I could move the motor and end up breaking a skirt or doing something. I would really need to take that piston off, which then I'd need wrist pin clips, you know, to get that off and out of the way to protect it, versus why not let the cylinder do the protection for me? So that's why we're doing it in the order that we are, and it works great. If you're a really old fan of the channel, you would have seen a video where I show how you can also hold this by taking and shoving a bunch of rope or old shop rags or something above the piston or down through the spark plug hole, and then you can create that compression to where the piston can't overcome, and then you can take it off that way too. So, well, man, I know EJ wants to keep turning wrenches and probably sick of holding that camera. I better find the tripod for today. So we'll get at it. If you're not a fan yet and you somehow stumbled on this, make sure and subscribe. Join the channel for all the deep dive stuff. Make it a great day. We're going to keep wrenching. Now, how do we shut this thing off? Here. Do you want to stop?